Hello. 8 in a row. Wasn't the prettiest one, but 8 in a row is 8 in a row. And you cannot be mad about that. They're finding different ways to do it. And I think the thing that's jumping off the page more so to me than absolutely anything else, and maybe it's the identity of the team, maybe it's a stretch that they're in. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see as we go on. But what this team is starting to become is just they fuck up less than the other team. And it's not just a little less, it's like a lot less. Like they just don't make the mistakes that the opposing teams have made. You have to work to score your goals against the Golden Knights. You think throughout basically all of this season, it's not easy to score on the Golden Knights. And it's not just the fact that like what the way they defend or how they're set up through the neutral zone or all of that. It's just the turnovers are not as debilitating as they've been in the past. You look at the 3 goals the Golden Knights got today. The very first one is just a play at the blue line, and it's the Golden Knights defensive blue line. I still don't understand how this happened. Guy just forgot that he had to keep the puck in, and it leads to a breakaway that Carrier goes, finds a way to sneak it through Chalgren and scores. Or Carl Waugh scores. The second one is a flubbed pass that Eichel just puts up the ice to Stevenson, and they score. The third one is a play on a power play where I don't know what they're trying to do at the blue line. You think he's trying to keep it in desperately, and instead it leads to a 2-on-1 break because Smith's already down there and Carlson knows to go up and make the play. Like, those are mistakes the Golden Knights don't make. Like, you think about basically this entire season, there's been very little in regards to that type of thing. Like, one that I can kind of think of is there was the stick in the corner that Hutton went and picked up. Like, I guess like that's one of the mistakes. I don't know of too many horrible mistakes that the Golden Knights have made. And when you really think about what is hockey and how do you become a good team in hockey, it's mostly be less mistake prone than the other team. And that's what the Golden Knights have been. Today was the perfect example of it, because if you really look at it, the only thing the Golden Knights really did offensively was take advantage of these breakaway chances that were there. They win the game on it. They score on the penalty kill. They scored across the way. All 3 of them are the same type of situation. It's breakaways based on breakdowns from the other team. When you look at the Golden Knights in the offensive zone today, there wasn't a lot of excitement outside of the fourth line. The fourth line constantly generates with the way that they continued making things happen, doing the right thing, getting to the goal, doing what they do. They're becoming the most consistent line on the team, which is crazy. Nonetheless, they've been able to do it night in, night out in the offensive zone. The rest of the team, it's hit or miss. Third line was an absolute nightmare today. Second line, good in the moments when they needed to be, but inside of the offensive zone, not all that great. And then the first line, I thought, spent a lot of time in their own end, even though they were put there in the first place to kind of deal with some of the problems there. I didn't think they were all that great offensively in the offensive zone outside of these mistakes. But when you go back to it, none of them made mistakes. The only real mistake the Golden Knights made today, and it was kind of a significant one, turns out it's significant in a positive way, is that, by the way, I need to remind myself to talk about this. I'm going to hit the star. Hang on. We're going to talk about that later. The third line at 12-2. We can't be concerned. Yeah, we can. But the biggest mistake the Golden Knights made in this game is an Amadio penalty that was a needless penalty, in my opinion. You don't really need to do that. And it ends up leading to the opportunity to get the break going the other way. Like, that's kind of what they needed, was something to open that game up, something to allow the Maple Leafs to make one more mistake, because I don't know that the Golden Knights were going to find a way to score just living in the offensive zone as they were. And they weren't even living in the offensive zone all that much throughout this particular game. So that's kind of what it's becoming to me, is like when they sit in this box and one in the defensive zone, in the zone defense, they're pretty consistent with it. You don't see a lot of horrible giveaways. And if they are even bad giveaways, typically they end up along the walls or on the way out, and they're not kind of streaking right back towards the goal. There's the one, now that I think about it, a couple games ago. Yeah, it was a turnover in the defensive zone that ends up right in front of Thompson, and the guy scores. I can't remember who it was, but I think it was the Ottawa game. Yeah. But the rest of it, like, they just haven't made those mistakes. The 1-2-2 neutral zone has been very good. It's been consistent. It hasn't been allowing really much of anything worse than 3-on-2 rushes. And even those aren't all that common. It barely allowed any 2-on-1 rushes. The way that they're trying to play in the offensive zone is you're noticing that you're not seeing defensemen really activate until a forward comes out. So typically it can be backwards, where it's like the defenseman activates and then the forward reads it and comes out behind it. That's not necessarily what the Golden Knights are doing. They're waiting for it to be a 2-3 where there's 2 forwards low and three players up high with a forward coming out. And then they get the activation from, typically it's Pietrangelo or Theodore. Sometimes you'll see McNabb do it. Whitecloud has done it less than he used to in the past. We've seen Haig. Martinez has basically done it very little this season, been very ineffective in the offensive zone, which is fine for the moment, because what it's doing is it's not giving up those rushes going the other way. Like, that's the problem that the Golden Knights had in the past. And the question now becomes, as we go forward, as teams start to clean things up a little bit, because today you look at it and it's like 11-3 in mistakes, where Toronto makes 11, Vegas makes 3, and they really don't bury enough of them to put themselves in the position they wanted to be in heading into the third. Now, they do bury the one where they absolutely need it, and they've certainly, I'm not trying to say this, all I'm trying to say is that normally they have been able to do enough to make it happen. But if those numbers go down to, say, 3-2 or 4-3 or something like that, are the Golden Knights going to come out on the right side of it? That's what time's going to tell. And that's where you do want to see a little bit more in the offensive zone. You do want to see the balance of the lineup show up a little bit more, where the third line's not playing 7 minutes in a game where you're kind of up against it, and you're kind of going uphill in many ways. I thought offensively the entire night, despite the fact that they're up 2-1 at the end of the first period, it did feel like they're going that way. And I do want to change the third line. But I'll talk about another thing that I do think is kind of the next piece of it, of what the Golden Knights have been doing well and why they're on an 8-game win streak and why they're 12-2 to this point, and why normally they're able to play a consistent brand of hockey that is either better than the other team or right there with the other team that allows them to stay in it. It's showing that they're better than most teams in the NHL. We still may have questions about what it looks like against the absolute best of the best in the NHL. And that's where we're headed, is, are we talking about, are we the best of the best in the NHL? Which is a nice change off of last season, which is like, are we a little bit better than the Canucks and the Stars and the Kings? That's that. Today's Periscope is brought to you by Conlon Associates CPAs. Please, if you have any tax questions, tax problems, tax, anything to do with taxes, go to Conler & Associates CPAs, conlercpa.com, KONDLER CPA.com. Tell them SinBin sent you. They'll hook you up with a free consultation. They are tremendous if you own a small business. If you don't want to do your books, or you need help doing your books, or you need information about what even you should be your books, or what you don't even know what books are, I recommend going to Conler & Associates CPAs. They are fantastic. Help me every single year. We are not that far away. We're sort of far away from tax day, but it's much easier to take care of it now. And a lot of times you can make life easier on yourself now or later if you deal with it now. ConlerCPA.com. So balance is the term that Cassidy used today. And I don't particularly like the term balance because, in my opinion, balance typically leans towards you're getting production from all 4 lines. You're getting 3 defensemen, three pairs of defensemen, that you're getting the consistent effort and consistent production across the lineup. Now, they are getting production from the 4th line. I don't know how much of that is going to be consistent, because a lot of it seems to be born out of rush chances. And I don't fully understand yet, and I need to maybe study this a little bit more. How are they generating the rush chances to see if it's as repeatable as it's been 14 games into the season? Because if it's not, that offense is going to dry up quickly, because even with the rush chances, they're not scoring at the rate that you would like. They had 4 breakaways today. The 4th line themselves, they finally got one. But where the balance and the term that he was using was when they have, or when they're in a game where they need the power play to step up, it will happen. Or if the power play doesn't step up, the penalty kill steps up, or if the offense isn't there that day, the defense steps up or the goalie steps up. And it's all these different pieces of like whoever it has to be or whatever it has to be in that particular game. It's typically found its way there. Today, it's penalty kill. They come up, they have a big opportunity, they do the job as much as they need to. Thompson makes a couple of big saves on Matthew's shots, and then the mistake is there. They are handed the opportunity, and they bury a 2-on-1 perfectly, exactly how you want to do it, without any concern of any goalie in the way. It didn't really matter. There was such a good run 2-on-1 that's the group that stepped forward and made the play. I like that part of it. And that part of it is something that I think is repeatable and is something that you can see over the course of an entire season and certainly through the playoffs. You do want improvement across the board, certainly of the special teams. I think they need a little bit more there. The goalies, this road trip has kind of maybe opened eyes that it's not going to be 2 goals against every single night. And so there you're like, okay, well, is the offense going to be there? So far at different times, it has. There's been other times where it hasn't. And that's where the defense has stepped up, specifically when they get leads. The thing that hasn't been balanced is they've been winning for most of the game, most of the nights. Now, they come into the third period down. I believe it was the 5th time they entered the third period down. They've won 4 of those games. That's impressive. Or at least they've been down in the third period 4 different times, and they've found a way to win all of those games, mostly in overtime, but they've found a way to get it done. That is positive. That is what you want to happen. And that's the part that, and yeah, like the shorthanded goal has been repeated over and over and over again. And that's something that's certainly not repeatable and not something you can rely on. However, they are good scoring shorthanded goals. They are going to get shorthanded goals. And if you sit here and say, can we get 1 shorthanded goal in a postseason series? The answer is probably yes. And that's exactly what you're looking for, where most teams aren't going to be able to get that. That's a goal that your power play does not have to score, or your penalty kill can give up 1 more because you're inevitably going to get that one. So that is positive. This is the other one, like the resiliency. Every time they go down, it feels like the tying goal is coming. Now, that I think is chicken and the egg. It has come, so it is going to feel like it's going to come. The question is, when they go into a stretch where it isn't there for 2 or 3 games in a row, what does it look like? And do you still have that feeling? Do we still have the feeling? Does the team still have the feeling? This is not going to roll for 82 games throughout the entire season and through the postseason. If it does, they're going to be one of the best teams in the history of the NHL. I still don't believe that they are that. However, there has been a resiliency, and I think the resiliency is mostly the fact that the second period hasn't been great. They've been really good in the first period. They've been really good in the third period. Yes, if you really think shorthanded goals are repeatable, you're out of your mind. The Golden Knights have 3 shorthanded goals. They might be the team that leads the league in shorthanded goals this season. There's a very strong chance that number is short of 15. And they have 3. I don't even think it's going to be 15. It might not even be 10. Like, those are not repeatable goals. You can get them from time to time. They are great. They are one of the best at getting those. But if you're going into a game saying we need a shorthanded goal to win, you're probably not going to win. That's not what's happening. That's not at all what's happening. Back to what I was saying. Second period has not been good. And really, it's not horrible because there's been some good ones in there. But most of the time, second period isn't good. First and third periods are good. I do think there is something to be said about the fact that there's 2 problems inside of the third period. One, the long change forces the zone D to be hemmed in a little bit more, and it leads to teams living in the offensive zone a little bit more. That leads to more shots against. That leads to more opportunities in front of the goal. That's been a bit of a problem this season. That is a Cassidy historical problem. It's not something that's like off the deep end. It's not blow your mind out because of it, whatever. Like, it's not that big of a deal, but it is something you are going to see. So at times you are going to have the games where you do fall behind. And the good news is in the first and third period, when that does not exist, when you can get your neutral zone going, when you are able to kind of commit to the forecheck a little bit more, which we have seen in a big way that the Golden Knights have been better in the first period, better in the third period. And today, I don't know that they were that much better in the third period until the last 6 minutes when they started get after the shorthanded goal. That's where you are going to be able to take advantage of teams. And the good news is, if you're going to be bad in a period, the second period's the better one to be bad in. If there's a systematic flaw, and I don't even think it's that bad, but if it is something, that's the period you want to not be all that good in, because you have 40 minutes and there's 40 minutes of long change or short change, whatever. There's 40 minutes of short change and 20 minutes of long change. That's the type of thing that I think is certainly positive. Where was this comment? Where'd it go? Somebody asked, oh, come on, where is it? There it is. How many times have the Golden Knights have we won and not been the better team? I would say it's 2. It hasn't been much at all. Today was probably close, but even that, I have a hard time saying they're not the better team. Were they completely on their game today? Not really. I don't think it was great, but again, it's mistakes and the lack of mistakes. The Golden Knights do not make mistakes near the level that most of these other teams have made them. And the other thing is, they're doing some of the times when they're giving up these goals, typically in these games, the last couple of games. Today's not a great example of it, but they've been way ahead, and then things have kind of fallen down as they've gone through, and they hang on and find a way. We know, I published the video. They're very fucking good at 6-on-5. Today, the first period was not a real offensive explosion. They get the goal 45 seconds in. They don't do a ton. They get the next goal. Really, a lot of it's in their own end. I thought the second period, they kind of were taking on water the entire way. They're lucky that period ended only at 3-2. And then in the third period, it didn't really go in their direction until after they get that opportunity on the shorthanded chance and they score that goal. So that's kind of where I'm at there. The next thing is minute distribution. And this is kind of where I'm going to get into changing the third line. And I'll put the comment up because I saved it, and we'll put it back up. Third line is concerning, but at 12-2, you can't be all that mad. So while I understand that portion of the comment, I also don't understand that idea of thinking, because if you were to tell somebody you can get a better player to play on your third line right now, and let's say it's a way better player, let's just use the example of saying they can have Mitch Marner tomorrow, and Mitch Marner can play on your third line, would you take one of the players off the third line? Of course you would. But saying that we can't do that because we have not acquired a new player, or a new player hasn't come back to health, doesn't really make sense to me. Just because they're winning doesn't mean that the third line is producing at the level that they should. Today, Brett Howden, 934 at even strength. Phil Kessel, 913. Michael Amadio, 757. They were all below in relative Fenwick, Corsi, shot percentage, expected goals percentage. They were negative. So all of those, what I mean by negative is compared to the rest of the team. They are definitely the line that has been the worst for the Golden Knights, and it has been consistent. Just because you're winning doesn't mean that those guys shouldn't come out. If they would not have gotten that shorthanded goal, the third line probably would not have come out and found a way to score a goal. And if something else had happened, we would not be sitting here saying, well, we have to switch the third line or whatever. You can't just sit there and say, we're winning, we are not going to break anything, or we're not going to fix anything. Nothing's broken. Well, there are things that are broken. I think the top pair is actually broken. I don't think Pietrangelo and Martinez are the long-term solution for this team. And I would think it would be better off soon to switch Martinez and McNabb. I don't know when that's going to happen. It probably will take some losses because that's how people think. But to me, that's not the way you should do it. And if they move, say, Howden out or Amadio out or Kessel out and bring in Lecision or Cotter, or decide to bring up Dorofeyev and go that route, or Mannanen, whatever, and then they lose, it's probably not going to be because of that group. Now, that group does not give up a goal today. They end up taking the penalty that leads to the shorthanded goal, so you could be all excited about that maybe. But to me, they've been poor. They have not been good enough throughout the entirety of the last 6-7 games or whatever that they have been together. You're not getting anything out of Kessel at all. Howden, when he has a decent game, like he actually did tonight, gets nothing. And Amadio has to be a guy that has guys driving offense for him. He's not going to help you drive it himself. Does it take trading someone to get, you find a way to get better in that regard? Yes, maybe it does. I certainly think that's possible. But until we get there, you might as well try more Cotter, try more Lecision, figure out what you want to do. And I get not wanting to break up the top six. I get not wanting to break up the fourth line. Those are fine. But to just sit here and be complacent with a line that, in my opinion, is clearly not working at all doesn't make sense to me. The good news out of the third line is Howden. He's actually been decent. And today, penalty killed quite a bit. So where's the number? Howden played a minute 04 on the penalty kill today, which they didn't have that much penalty kill time. It was a couple 4 minutes maybe. Yeah, 4 minutes. So he's out there for a quarter of the penalty kill time. Kolazar was only out there for one shift, but it's 33 seconds. And then you do end up with Stone gets, what did Stone get? $1.04. Stevenson $1.07. Like, I don't mind Smith and Carlson in there. Like, if they're so good at it that you might want to just utilize that when you need to. But I don't think Mark Stone has been so good at it that you have to have him on there. I definitely don't think Eichel's been so good at it that you have to have him on there. Like, that's kind of just where I'm at on that. So I would rather see more Howden, more Kolazar, more Carrier, those types of guys. Like, give Waugh as many of those minutes as physically possible. He got $1.28 today. That's good. But that's kind of where I'm at on that. So that's a positive that I saw, that they are trying to lean into that direction of like, yeah, we do want to take some of this minute load off. Again, overall, is this a good game for the Golden Knights? Probably not. When you look back and you say, okay, well, what happened over the course of the season? When are we happy? What are we happy with? What are we not happy with? This game's probably not going to fall in either direction. I don't think they were particularly great defensively. I don't think they got a particularly great goaltending performance. I don't think they were great offensively. They just didn't have as many mistakes. And that, in and of itself, is good. That is a piece that if that can be there every single night, you're going to win more often than not, especially against teams that aren't very good. Toronto's decent. Toronto's playing well at the moment. Like, beating Toronto in Toronto matters. It certainly is a notch in the, like, we can be good here. This is a good team. At full health, this is a team that's better than most teams in the NHL. We don't know where they stack up against Calgary, Edmonton, Colorado, Florida, Carolina, Tampa, New York Rangers, maybe I would put in there. Those are the teams that we have the questions about. Dallas, maybe. They're kind of falling off. Those are the teams that we want to see more against. The good news is we're going to get it. We're going to get it. We're going to get to see, does this mistake-proof system help them beat some of those teams? Or are we just kind of feasting on some of the teams down the road? This team is good. Toronto is good. They're playing good. They have good players. They got a pretty decent goaltending performance, if not good goaltending performance. Winning this game matters, and doing it without your best game, without being as crisp offensively, is another huge positive. They've won 8 straight. They've won 12 of 14. They're in a fantastic position to just waltz into the playoffs moving forward. That's a huge positive. That's massive. If they go 10-10 from right now, they'd be exactly where they were last season at 22-12. And I don't think they're going 10-10 from right here. They're probably going to be further along, and we know what kind of collapse it took for them to miss the playoffs by like a point or two. The chances they miss the playoffs have become low. There are still the same questions. We have not gotten answers to the number one question for me on this team. I hope we never have to get the answer. And if we go the entire season without ever giving the answer, that's awesome. But the number one question remains depth. What happens when you lose any player out of your top 9 players, which is basically the first, second, and fourth line now? Like, if they're without Nick Waugh, how bad does it hurt? If they're without Mark Stone for a month, how bad does it hurt? Those questions need to be answered. And maybe, or hopefully they are never answered. But I think that as we go forward, that is going to be answered. And that's where we are going to learn more about the team. But the good news is we now have this baseline of saying early in the season, when the game was going the way that they were going, when we were playing some teams that were either not as good or right there with the Golden Knights, a healthy Golden Knights team playing at their best smokes these teams. A healthy Golden Knights team playing pretty good beats a lot of these teams. And even when the score and the game kind of goes against them, they still are able to manage to find a way. That's a massive positive. Stick that in the bank and go to bed happy with that, because that is something that you can rely on. But you can't expect to be fully healthy from now until April, and then April until June. It's not terribly likely. So what does the depth of the team look like, and how does that change? That's what we're going to eventually see. But until we get there, let's learn more about the healthy team and learn more about where do we need to improve, or does there need to be improvement? I would argue there still does. The number one place I think improvement can happen right now is on their third line. I don't think Kessel's good enough. I don't think Amadio's good enough. I can even make the argument that you can upgrade on Kolazar on the fourth line, but I get not wanting to mess with that. They've done pretty well to this point. So I'm not that concerned about that at this moment. And I think if the third line was better, the fourth line would be considered better, because they would be falling back into their place. At right now, the third line or the fourth line's having to produce at the fourth line's level. So there's a little bit more pressure on them. I think they're doing it at a perfectly fine pace. Clearly 12-2-0, they're doing it to the level they need to. But for the most part, it's not because they're out offensing teams. It's because they're out not mistaking teams. I don't know. That didn't make sense. That made sense, but that grammar was shit. You know what I'm saying? That needs to continue, and then they're going to need to take the steps to get better, to improve enough to be able to beat all of the best teams in a 7-game series. That's what we have for the next, whatever it is, 70 games of the season, whatever's left, 68 games of the season. That's where we're headed. I'm good on, is this team good? They're good. This is a good team. Like, this is a team that's clearly better than most teams in the league. That's step one. We weren't there at 4 weeks ago. I wasn't here. 5 weeks ago, whenever it was. I wasn't there. I'm there now. They're clearly a good team. When fully healthy, they're a good team. Are they a great team? Are they an elite team? And then can they withstand some of those other issues? We'll see. That's what time will tell. That's all I got for today. 8 straight wins. Got to love that. 12-2. Got to love that. Possible 5-game win on a road trip. Wild. Don't think they've ever done that before. I know they had 4 last year. But I don't think they've ever done 5. It's going to be a tough game against Buffalo. I'm interested to see kind of how they respond. Last game when they went to Buffalo was clearly the team that cared a lot more about that game, and it kind of beat the Golden Knights up because of it. This game, I wonder if the Golden Knights kind of push back with Eichel going the way that he's been going. I do wonder, maybe they're kind of like, you know what, let's get one back for him. I could see it being one of the better efforts of the season. I expect the Golden Knights to win on Thursday. I really do. Goalie interference is tomorrow. Thanks again to Conlon Associates CPAs for sponsoring all the Periscopes. I'll try to we'll do another one of these on Thursday for sure, and then we'll see what happens on Saturday. We might do a Twitter space after that one. Depends on what's going on. Again, plan is Periscopes after most road games, Twitter spaces after most home games, goalie interference on Wednesdays, and then podcasts fit in whenever they need to. Obviously, up until we get to me going to Qatar, and then I'll come back, and hopefully they're still dominating at that point. That's all I got for tonight. Good night, everybody. Can't find my cursor to turn this off.